A man dressed as a Shinto priest kneels before a furnace covered in sacred symbols. He has fasted for 3 days. His hands tremble as he lights the fire that will burn continuously for 72 hours. The temperature will reach 1300 degrees. Only 30% of the metal will survive. He will bend the steel 16 times in a row, creating millions of microscopic layers, and in the end, after 5 years of working without receiving a single penny, he will still not be considered a master. This is the ritual for creating the katana, the most lethal and sacred sword ever forged by humanity. And what you are about to discover about this process will completely change the way you see these weapons. The crafting of a samurai katana is not merely metalwork. It's a spiritual ritual so intense that it transforms ordinary men into something akin to priests. Before even touching the metal, the blacksmith must undergo days of fasting and purification, praying before altars dedicated to Kaneyama Hiko no Kami, the god of the forge, and Amaterasu, the sun goddess. The workshop itself is considered a sacred place, with walls covered in religious symbols and ritual cords hanging everywhere. When the work finally begins, the master blacksmith dons ceremonial white robes identical to those of a Shinto priest. Every movement he makes is accompanied by murmured prayers. The belief is simple and absolute. The sword being created is not just an object. It possesses its own soul, and that soul must be pure from the very first moment. That's why everything in the workshop, from the hammers to the furnace, is purified with salt and holy water before each use. The ritual of lighting the furnace is as important as any religious ceremony. The blacksmith hammers a simple iron bar until it forms a sharp point, and when this point is struck with sufficient force and speed, it absorbs enough heat to ignite a piece of paper. This flame is used to light the main furnace, and this specific fire, born of metal and discipline, is considered sacred. From that moment on, the furnace will burn non-stop for 3 whole days and 3 nights. During all this time, the master and his apprentices cannot sleep for more than a few hours. They must constantly feed the fire with charcoal and iron sand, monitoring the temperature with absolute precision. An error of just a few degrees can ruin months of work. The material being created in this 72-hour process is called tamahagan, which means jewel steel. And that's no exaggeration. After the furnace finally cools and is broken, the master finds a mass of steel mixed with impurities. He examines each piece with obsessive attention, separating the fragments according to their carbon content. Only 25 to 35% of the original material will be considered good enough to become part of a katana. The rest is discarded without hesitation. But this brutal selection is only the beginning of the process. What comes next is even more intense. The finest pieces of tamahagan are then heated until they are incandescent, and the blacksmith begins to hammer them repeatedly. Every blow must be perfect. There is no margin for error. The master uses a 10-kilogram hammer, and his apprentices accompany him with equally heavy hammers, striking in absolute synchronicity. The sound that echoes through the workshop is hypnotic and brutal at the same time, as if the forge itself were breathing. The steel is folded over itself, heated again, hammered and folded once more. This process is repeated up to 16 times in a row. Each fold doubles the number of layers in the metal. After 16 folds, the blade contains more than 32,000 microscopic layers of steel. Some historical katanas have more than 1 million layers, so thin that they are invisible to the naked eye. This layered structure is what gives the katana its legendary combination of flexibility and hardness. But there is a hidden secret in the folding process that few know. During the bending process, the blacksmith burns rice straw and spreads the black ashes over the steel. This is not just tradition. The ashes act as a chemical regulator, preventing the metal from overheating and losing carbon. Without these ashes, the steel would be too weak to cut. It's sophisticated chemical knowledge disguised as an ancestral ritual. After all the bending, the blacksmith creates the blade's internal structure. He takes high-carbon steel, heats it, and hammers it into a long piece with a U-shaped channel. Then he takes low-carbon steel and turns it into a strip that fits perfectly inside this channel. The hard steel forms the edge of the sword, capable of maintaining a razor-sharp cutting edge. The flexible steel forms the body and spine of the blade, capable of absorbing impacts without breaking. When these two types of steel are forged together, they create a weapon that defies physics. The blade is both hard enough to cut through armor and flexible enough to bend without breaking. But the most critical and dangerous process is yet to come. It's the moment called yaki-ire, the hardening of the blade, and this is where most swords fail. The blacksmith prepares a special mixture of clay, ashes, and water. Each master has their own secret recipe, guarded with the same care a chef guards their spices. This clay paste is applied to the blade, thicker at the spine and thinner at the edge. Then comes the part that separates the masters from the apprentices. The blacksmith turns off all the lights in the workshop. He works only with the light of the embers in the furnace. The blade is heated until it begins to glow, and the master observes the color of the metal with an almost supernatural intensity. He doesn't use thermometers. He doesn't use measuring devices. He relies only on his eyes and his experience. When the color is exactly right, a specific shade of orange-red that only decades of practice can teach one to recognize, the blacksmith acts. He takes the blade and plunges it into the water at once. The thermal shock is violent. The water boils instantly. Steam explodes around the sword, and in that brutal moment, the blade takes its final shape. The difference in the thickness of the clay causes different parts of the sword to cool at different speeds. The edge cools rapidly and becomes extremely hard. The spine cools more slowly and remains flexible. This difference in temperature and cooling rate causes the blade to naturally bend, creating the iconic shape of the katana. But here lies the danger. If the temperature is wrong, even by a few degrees, the blade cracks. Months of work are destroyed in a second. The sound of a sword cracking during yaki-ire is considered one of the most devastating sounds a swordsmith can hear. And you, were you aware of all the complexity behind the making of a katana? Leave your opinion in the comments about which part of this process impressed you the most. If the blade survives the yaki-ire, sharp forging, it is carefully examined for any defects. The master looks for microscopic cracks, imperfections in the curvature, irregularities in the steel pattern. If anything is wrong, the sword is rejected. There is no middle ground. Either the blade is perfect or it is rubbish. The katanas that pass this brutal inspection are then sent to the polishers, and this is another process that can take months. There are 7 different types of polishing stones used in sequence, each finer than the last. The polisher works millimeter by millimeter, creating a perfect mirror on the steel. A bad polisher can destroy an excellent blade by removing too much metal or altering the geometry of the edge. An exceptional polisher can make even a mediocre blade look like a work of art. Polishing is not just aesthetic. It reveals the harder, the grain pattern created by the folds of the steel. Each katana has a unique harder, like a fingerprint. Experts can identify not only the school of the blacksmith, but sometimes even the specific master who forged the blade just by examining this pattern. And there's another fascinating detail that appears during polishing, the hamon, the wavy line that separates the hard edge from the flexible body. This line is neither painted nor engraved. It's a real physical characteristic of the metal, created by the differential hardening process. Each swordsmith develops their own hamon pattern, like a visual signature. Some create gentle waves, others form irregular mountain patterns, some make almost straight lines. Collectors pay fortunes for swords with especially beautiful hamon. But let's talk about what truly makes this process unique, the time and human sacrifice involved. To become a licensed katana blacksmith in Japan, you first need to become an apprentice to an already licensed master. The apprenticeship lasts at least 5 years, and here's the brutal detail. You receive no payment during those 5 years. 0. You need to have enough money saved to survive half a decade without income, or depend entirely on your family. Many people start the apprenticeship, but give up halfway through because they simply can't afford to live. Those who persevere discover that even after 5 years, they are still not considered true masters. It takes another 10 years of constant practice for a blacksmith to be truly respected in the profession. And even after all that time and sacrifice, there are strict rules. A licensed blacksmith in Japan can only produce 2 long swords per month. No matter how skilled they are, no matter how many orders they have, 2 swords per month is the maximum limit imposed by the government. This means that after 15 years of training and investment, your earning potential is severely limited. And there's more. To open your own independent workshop, you need approximately 10 million yen, equivalent to over 400 uro-ries. Think about it. You spent 5 years earning nothing. You spent another 10 years building a reputation. And now you need almost 500,000 ries just to get started. That's why today there are only about 250 katana smiths working in all of Japan. The profession is dying because the barriers to entry are so high that few people can overcome them. But those who succeed, those who survive this brutal process, create something that transcends the definition of a weapon. A traditionally forged katana can cut through a silk scarf floating in the air. It can cut through metal armor. It can maintain its sharp cutting edge for centuries if properly cared for. There are katanas over 800 years old that are still in perfect condition, as sharp as the day they were forged. This is possible because every step of the manufacturing process was executed with obsessive perfection. The steel was selected correctly. The folds were made in the exact number. The hardening was performed at the perfect temperature. The polishing revealed the blade's true potential. And throughout the entire process, the blacksmith maintained the correct mental state, treating the work as meditation, as prayer, as a sacred act. The samurai believed that the katana was not just a tool of war, it was an extension of the warrior's soul. When a samurai died, his sword was often buried with him or passed down to his son as an inheritance more precious than any amount of gold. Famous swords were given proper names and treated almost like living beings. There are records of samurai conversing with their swords before battles, asking permission to use them and thanking them afterward. This may seem like superstition, but when you understand the creation process, when you realize that dozens of people worked for months just to create that specific blade, when you know that the blacksmith literally put part of his life into that metal, the idea that the sword has a soul no longer seems so absurd. If you enjoyed discovering the secrets behind the ritual of creating samurai katanas, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more fascinating facts about the culture and techniques of ancient Japanese warriors.